This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the beautiful hill country of Texas. All right, guys, yesterday actually, was Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I think it is very important that we remember the past. I think it's very important that we remember the Jewish Holocaust. And I think one of the best ways that we can honor the memory of those victims of genocide and democide in the past are to look around the world today and say, who like them needs a voice? And so the perfect guest for this show is my dear friend, Sheila Liaugminas. Sheila is a journalist. She is a writer. She was a radio talk show host, my favorite radio show, for 16 years. And now she has a podcast. It's in the show notes. You can check out her podcast there. And she has a book, to me, that is an essential book. It's a must read. It's non-negotiable, Essential Principles of a Just Society and Human Culture. Sheila is my friend. As you'll hear, we've worked together for over a decade, almost 2 decades, standing with the vulnerable in the midst of genocides, real-world genocides that are happening today. All right, guys? It is important to remember the past. It is important to remember the past. But one of the reasons it's important is so we can honor the vulnerable today. We don't want to be voyeurs, right? If you watch these movies for an emotional response, for some sort of cathartic response, but it doesn't inspire you to do the hard and daring work of serving the vulnerable today, it's really even worse than a waste of time. So it is a privilege to introduce you to Sheila. So let's get on with the interview. This episode is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. It is our mission to stand with the most vulnerable people in the world, the most vulnerable moments in their life, in their history, and you can stand with us. Go to thegreatcampaign.org, become a monthly donor, and you get a copy of my book, The Race to Save Our Century. Any donation, $20 or more, you get a copy of my book with John Zmirak, The Race to Save Our Century. Also, this episode is being brought to you by My Pillow. I've been using My Pillow now for over a month, and it has made a big difference in my sleep patterns. I've been sleeping like a baby, and they don't go flat. You can wash and dry them as many times as you want, and they maintain their shape. They are made in the USA, which is another way of saying you do not have to worry about forced labor with this product. Can't say the same about my phone, my laptop, but at least I know My Pillow wasn't made by forced labor. And there's some deals, big deals. For $69.98, well, normally it's $69.98, but for $29.98, you can get the Queen Pillow. For $5 more, you get the King. There is a 60-day money-back guarantee. Go to mypillow.com, click on the Radio Listener Square, and there you will find amazing offers and deep, deep discounts. You can also call 800-876-0708. Use the code Jones. If you don't use the code Jones, you don't get your deep discounts, and my advertisers don't know how awesome my audience is. So use the code Jones. All right? Holocaust Remembrance Day. As Elie Wiesel said, to hear a witness is to be a witness. To hear a witness is to become a witness. All right? I really botched that profound sentiment, but it is what it is. Here we go. The Jason Jones Show. Sheila Liaugminas. Aloha, Sheila Liaugminas. Welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
Oh, Jason, it's great to be here. Always good to talk with you.
Yeah, by usually, I mean every other time we've talked together, I have been on your show.
Yeah. It's great to talk anytime, even when we're off the air. In fact, especially when we're off the air, we can really cover a lot. But we try to cover what we can when we're on the air. But yeah, you've been on my show a lot. In fact, Jason, when that show was ending and I had my last day, I thought, who am I going to have on the show for the last day? I mean, when you think back over all the years you've done a show, all the guests you've had, I mean, congressmen, people in the, on Capitol Hill, theologians, academics, scholars, and all that. I went for the great human rights activist, Jason Jones.
Can I tell you that was one of the greatest privileges in my life when your show, which was an iconic show that was on Relevant Radio for 16 years, when you asked me to be your last guest, that was the biggest compliment anyone has ever paid me. So that meant the world to me. And so I've wanted you on my show, and now you're free. You're free agent. You have your own podcast. Of course, you're a journalist and a writer, award-winning, celebrated. But I have to tell you this, Sheila, nobody has been more generous to me or to the mission of my organization than you. And there have been a lot of folks who have been as generous. I have a constellation of beautiful friends, but nobody has been more generous to you. And I think so many of the milestones in my life, there you were right next to me, Sheila.
Yeah.
And we've sort of been on the same wavelength when it comes to human rights issues and then the power of media. So yesterday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And the reason I wanted to have you on is because you, like me, I remember when I was writing my book, I called you, I told you my book, the title of my book, and you're like, hey, I'm writing that book, and here's my title, and they were so similar. And you and I, there's not a lot of folks that are on our wavelength. There's, I think the way we both communicate strikes people as maybe a bit uncanny, but we've been on the same wavelength. What was it in your life that gave you this sort of hyper focus to stand with the vulnerable or advance the interest of the vulnerable?
Jason, it's in my own book. I just tell anecdotally a very brief tale, the account. In my book, it's called Non-Negotiable, Essential Principles of a Just Society and Humane Culture. And the only reason I bring up the title of it is because that's what tells the story, that since I was a little girl, that I was reading the daily newspaper. I was listening to the news on TV since I was really a little girl. And that mattered to me when people were oppressed anywhere. And so what's just society and humane culture? So I tell it real quickly in the book because it works in this one chapter where I put it, that when I was a little girl, it was my first trip out of my Midwestern state with my dad on a trip he had to make to the Deep South. And I'd never even been out of the Midwest, much less Deep South. So we went down there, and it was just an experience that kind of was part of my formation. Because we were in a drugstore where my dad was getting supplies and stuff for us along the way. And I hate to even tell the story, but I mean, it's true. It's part of our history, the American history, the part of the blotch, the stain that we've still got to talk about with the other human rights issue of our time, the great civil rights movement. But I saw a water fountain and a hand-painted sign. It's their marker sign that said, I hate to say these words, no colors allowed. And I was absolutely mortified. And I shouted, because my dad was like an aisle or two over, Daddy, really loudly. How children are. I think nobody hears them except the person they're talking to, their dad. And he comes over and says, shh, quiet. What? And I pointed and I said, they can't do that. And that's my sensibility, Jason, in that, DNA and the way
Sheila, what year was that?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't want to tell. I know it was just a very long time ago when those kinds of things were still happening. And, we had already, Jason, my dad and I experienced enough, especially me as a little girl. I didn't know this was going on. You come out of your own cocoon, if you will, your neighborhood, your community, and you go to another place like that. I didn't realize how much bias there was against us because we were Yankees.
Catholic.
Catholic. Yeah, looking for a parish. I'm used to our parish community and all that. And so that was that bias. But when I realized the depth that bias went to when it was color of skin, and it was a whole it was a whole class of human beings that informed, Jason, the work I've done with you for decades on the human rights issue of our time, and that's the class of human beings in the womb, the most vulnerable. So anyway, that's kind of one way of saying why my life's work has been about finding the truth and telling the truth. Because even back then, all through my years of growing up, college, studies abroad and working abroad and so forth, I've seen increasing tendencies to turn, everybody's going to say, duh, I mean, this is like very obvious today, but it wasn't always that so obvious. That an increasing tendency, whether it's media, but also academics, turning away from what we know to be the truth. And now we have this cultural thing going on where it's your truth, my truth, shout your truth, speak your truth, your truth. That just like sends up red flags with me, because your truth, you can tell your story.
Yeah, and they're dishonest, right? Because they say this, your truth, my truth, that, but we've never had a culture that's been more illiberal. With this cancel culture, we've never lived in a time where a broad spectrum of ideas have been deemed unacceptable. Tulsi Gabbard has been on a terror in the press the past couple of weeks. I think she's the most important person in America right now. And, I mean, she's calling out the KGB Stasi-like rhetoric of the former head of the CIA, John Brennan. And so when they talk about your truth, my truth, I'm off Twitter now, Sheila. I don't know if you know that. I got off Twitter and Instagram, and I'm getting off all social media. And what made me do that is I asked myself, when Hannah Arendt wrote, I said this in the last show, when she wrote Eichmann in Jerusalem, if she would have tweeted that out, would she have been canceled? 100%. Would she have been kicked off Twitter? 100%. Would the Reverend Martin Luther King, would he have been kicked off of Twitter in 1961? Malcolm X, of 100%. Then I don't need to be there. And so that goes to my question. A lot of people, I think all of us have within us a desire for justice, a longing to serve the vulnerable. But so many people get swept away by what I call social justice junk food, which if you want to know what that is, go to your average diocesan Catholic high school or Jesuit high school and sit in a social justice class. And what that is, social justice junk food, is feigning concern for communities that are not vulnerable but that are in vogue. So in 1951, to stand with for civil rights for Black Americans would be bold and courageous. It would go against the spirit of the age. In 1950, it would take courage. It wouldn't take courage in 1950 to defend a Christian baker who didn't want to bake a cake for a homosexual married couple or a couple, right? It wouldn't take courage. Today, to stand with the Christian family who's like, that goes against our beliefs, we're not going to bake that cake, it would take courage. Why do you think, because you stand with a lot of issues that are they're not in vogue, they're not the headlines, you're not going to get laurels for advancing the interests of the Yazidi, for example. Why do you think that you were pushed through just this general desire? I'm sure a lot of people have, and that's why we have so many sort of gross expressions of solidarity, but they're actually solidarity with the vulnerable, and they use that to sort of dox real weak communities. Why do you think you pushed through and sort of have remained committed to the truly vulnerable?
Because Jason, I've always pursued. I remember this. Another childhood memory I have is just searching for the truth. And even when this is a vivid memory as well. When I would watch news and have heroes or have people I looked up to in positions of power or authority, or whether it's not quite a celebrity, I'm not celebrity struck, but I certainly looked toward who the leaders were. If anything came up about anybody I admired or looked up to, that sounded ajar from what I believed to be principled or true, then I really wanted to look at that. And I remember as a little girl and a young girl and then an adolescent and all, so going through those years, I kept thinking over and over. This is my Catholic upbringing, and it was of a different sort than what you just said. Jesuit Catholic social teaching is kind of different in places. But what drove me was, I just want to know the truth. It's just tell me the truth, and then I'll go where that leads. So if that means that somebody I had admired turns out to be standing for something unprincipled, calling it something else, then that will inform me then where to turn my admiration, if you will, where to emulate, where to focus attention to help others see the good that's happening over here while you all are paying attention to this over here. And now I see that this is an unprincipled person that's using euphemisms for something that it means something different. I hate this, Jason, I hate this semantic engineering, the distortion of language. And that people don't realize it, but that is forming their public opinion every single day. People's opinions are being formed every day, and a lot of them don't realize it. So I knew that there is a truth out there, and I wanted to know the truth. Just tell me the truth, and then I'll follow that. And that's when I realized that a lot of this, as you say, was following the spirit of the age. What's in vogue right now as the vulnerable. And then you get lauded and praised for the don't rip the baby from the mother's arms at the border. Well, of course not. But don't rip the baby from the mother's womb either. And some of those people in power in Washington will say one, the border, but not the other. They'll stand for ripping the baby from the mother's womb. And I see that clearly. So that's just what motivates me. And then, Jason, attending, I know I'm jumping, a United Nations conference several years ago on genocide. It just covered the gamut. The Knights of Columbus were there with their new report. It covered a lot and from the Middle East. I interviewed one-on-one Archbishop Jean-Bart from Aleppo, Syria, Father Douglas Bazi from Erbil. And there was a Yazidi girl there who broke down in tears, who had escaped her captors, who had been, young girl, had been a slave of theirs. And through a translator was telling her story. Kayla Mueller's parents were there. And al-Baghdadi people captured their daughter who had done humanitarian work, and she became his slave. And it was horrifying to listen to that. And you sit there, and I'm not one of those people, that's terrible, somebody ought to do something. That's terrible. What's being done right now? What can we do, or what is being done? Sign me up. Sorry, I just needed
No, and you've always been there. You were side by side with me, what I call my biggest failure in life. You were right there. I don't know if you remember, but, prior to the invasion of Iraq, I was outspoken that if we invade Iraq, we'll pave the way for genocide. And, I was a young man. I was chairman of the Young Republicans. I didn't have much of a platform. I had a little radio show. And then once we invaded, I said, now we cannot leave. We have to be here for the long, long, long haul. But I knew we were going to leave. And we did. And things weren't going that things seemed to be stabilized when Obama pulled the troops out. I knew it was premature, but I thought maybe I was wrong. Bush had sort of created stability, and the economy was coming back, and the minorities were being protected. But then Obama pulled the troops out. Then there was the first IS attack on October 31st, 2011, I think, or 2010. And as soon as this happened, I had my assistant at the time, which was Dale Ahlquist's daughter, Ashley. I said, call the leaders of the Assyrian and Chaldean community in Chicago. We need to get serious because the door's just been kicked open, and it's going to get very ugly. And we held an event at the Blue Star restaurant in Chicago. And if you remember, even some of the leaders from the Chaldean and Syrian community thought I was a little alarmist, that this was one attack. It was very horrible, but that, we don't have any evidence to believe that this is going to spread. Well, it was worse than anyone could have imagined. And we were trying to put together a coalition with publicists and lobbyists, and we really weren't successful in that. And I always look back to that, and in many ways I blame myself. I'm like, I saw this in 2001, and then it took over 10 years to unfold, and yet I was still a complete failure in trying to wake people up to the dangers. But you were there with me. Do you remember that at the Blue Star? It was a great Italian restaurant. It was beautiful.
I know. I remember that so well, Jason. And don't call yourself a failure, because it's not. Anybody, we will never know on this side of the veil who has heard something you've said or any of us has said. We will never know who was touched or moved to do something. So that's not a failure at all. You did what you needed to do. It was heroic. I've always seen you as quite heroic, just stellar. And the more, Jason, other people are revealed to be, well, you could say hypocritical. I just say disingenuous, or at the very, very, very least, inconsistent with what they will stand for and what they will not stand for, or what they refuse or cancel, as you've so well put it. You have stood out there, to me, on a high mountaintop, shouting for all who will hear, or speaking through a megaphone for all who will hear, about people all over the world, right here in front of us, in our country, and far away. It's not as far away anymore. The world's a smaller place. When Pope Francis talks about those on the existential periphery, they can be people, it sounds like, the other side of the world, right? It can be that. There are people on the other side of the world desperately struggling to survive, and they want us to know that and do anything we can. But there are people in our country and babies in the womb. So you've been there for all of them. And when you did try to form that coalition, whether it came, how much of it came together, you will not know really what people out there were inspired to do by hearing you. And I know, look, in defense of Christians, I mean, I've been on Capitol Hill when they called together a group, and I was part of their day of it was activism by engaging congressmen in this auditorium in the Capitol itself, where congressman after congressman after congressman came all day and talked about what that particular congressman was doing on behalf of the most vulnerable and endangered people in the Middle East, in defense of Christians. So that kind of stuff is happening because people like you are not looking the other way or dropping the issue.
No, I'm not gonna look the other way, and I think we're in another position again where we have to look to Syria with this administration.
Yeah.
And if they shatter this regime, Syria will be worse than Libya, worse than Iraq, just because of the cultural and ethnic makeup. So, I mean, we have a lot of work, and we can build on past failures. What is it? And the boxers have a saying: "Win or learn." We win or learn, and I think we learn from each campaign. Now, one of the most beautiful nights of my life, you were there with me when we had 2 weeks to throw a premiere in Chicago. They said, "Hey, we want to throw a premiere of our movie. Can you help? We'll give you 2 weeks." We got the biggest theater in Chicago, the Copernicus Theater, and we premiered Father Jersey's movie and a documentary on Father Jersey Popescu, which was just, a beautiful film on Father Jersey. And thanks to you and your audience, in 2 weeks, we sold out the Copernicus Theater.
It's just all tremendous spirit, right? Because the title of the movie is Messenger of the Truth. And that's what Father Popescu was in Poland. And that's why his cause for canonization is working its way through the Vatican. He was unmoved, unchanged, unafraid in death threats, with death threats. He was a parish priest who then wound up drawing thousands of people to flock to where he was, celebrating the Mass and giving homilies that were so powerful, for the very similar or same reason that John Paul's 1979 visit to Victory Square in Warsaw. Same thing. When the people who had been so oppressed begin to hear the truth, and Father Popescu was the messenger of the truth, hence the name of the film. That is so, Jason, truth has such power that lies can prevail for the time being, but truth will always win out, always. So it's only a matter of time. And when people hear that, it convicts them right in the heart, where we all are motivated, and in the mind, the ideas that form our actions, but in the heart, that their hearts swell largely because of they're hearing the truth. And now I'm motivated and I have courage. And they don't think that way. They just thought, yes, this is the truth. And that really empowers people. So that's why that film was so important. And you're right. The Copernicus Center holds, I think, 800, right? We filled it. But with the help of, you tell one person who has some authority or has networks of people, you tell another person, and then that person tells people, and then that keeps going, and like waves. It just within days spread. And when we both walked in that theater, it's like, whoa, we never had any idea we'd
no, and you are
800.
You are our MC. Now I had. Do you remember what I did there that shocked everyone? That was the most. I had so much fun.
You tell it.
Okay, so guys, this is what I did. So it was the biggest event. So Father Jersey was the spiritual founder of the Solidarity movement that really led to the end of totalitarian socialism in the Eastern Bloc. And he was murdered by the KGB. Sheila and I have since become friends with their family, a beautiful family. But so all these politicians showed up because you have 800 leaders in the Polish community. So what I did is they all lined up to speak. We were going to let all the politicians speak. But what I did is I stood on the steps up to the stage, and then when it was their turn, I would say, are you pro-life or pro-choice? And if they said pro-choice, they weren't allowed on the stage. All these aldermans and, Chicago big shots, they couldn't believe it. They looked at me like I was crazy, and I just said, listen, this is a movie about a man who stood up to the evil of his age. You are an advocate of the evil of our age. You cannot go on that stage. You're not going on that stage. It's my stage. And the look on their faces was, I wish I should have had a cameraman off in the distance over my shoulder, because I could have made a great work of art. I could have modern art at the shock and horror in all these politicians' faces when this schlub from Hawaii wasn't letting them on the stage.
Oh, wait, the other thing is my show was well known enough anyway that some of them saw you and me and a couple of the people behind the film sitting off to the side before the program began that evening, and we introduced the film on stage. We were sitting off to the side at a table ahead of time outside the actual theater in the anteroom, and I remember one of the politicians came up to tap me on the shoulder and talk to me about my show and coming on my show or something, and you just almost like a bodyguard, Jason. You threw yourself in, not really physically, but you put your hand up. You said, wait. And you did, before I spoke, you asked him, you're a politician, aren't you? And he said, yes. And you asked him questions about his beliefs, what party he is, what he stands for. And one question you asked up front is, are you pro-life? And when he said, well, and so what, waffling, you knew. And you said, no, get out of here. No, you're not talking to her. We've got things to do. This is about to begin. We have no time, and get out of here. I'll never forget that.
Well, hey, we got to be bold for the vulnerable. And these people, they think they're so big, and they're just so small. And someone like Father Jersey, who's beaten to death and thrown onto an icy river,
yeah,
he was the big shot. The teenage mother who keeps her baby and works at a hard job and goes to community college, gets the GED, that's the big shot. The Yazidi girl who survived ISIS and is working at a McDonald's in Nebraska while she's waiting for her eye surgery because her head was caved in by an ISIS boot. She's the big shot. These politicians, they think they're slick. They think they're important. They're nobodies. Really, they choose. They're made in the image of God, but they choose to be nobodies because they so perfectly conform to the spirit of the age. And you and I have been around so many heroes like Dan Lipinski, Congressman Chris Smith, Frank Wolf. These are the real heroes to me.
Amen, they are. And something I think often is people, it's always like, Jason, when you pray the Liturgy of the Hours or you read the Psalms or whatever, it's so often you come across that part in different Psalms. They live as if God did not exist. And I kind of look up and think about that for a minute. I think, that's right, because this all ends. At some point, this all ends. And then, bam, you're going through that veil, and you will face judgment. And then nobody will be beside you to take up your cause. Well, he or she did this, and they did that good work, and, what, that doesn't matter. What did you do for the most vulnerable? And someone once put it to me, Jason, our pro-life movement, it's not just that you'll be asked, what did you do for the babies in the womb? That person said, will be asked, what did you do in the face of evil? And we have evil all over the world that's being committed against the vulnerable of all demographics and all ages and all situations. But it's standing in the breach for them. It's being the voice for the voiceless and telling people, and not looking away saying, well, that's too bad, somebody ought to do something. We have to be the ones to do something. If it's something every day, but something towards ending that, that's all what we're called to do. We're not called to save the world. That's been done. But we're called to help keep it from sliding any further.
How do we, you know what my big fear is, Sheila? You know, I think there's two sort of the dialectic of, on the one hand, there's apathy or helplessness. You know, what can I do? Who am I? I'm not going to do anything. Then on the other hand, there's the do-gooder who, you know, has 100 bumper stickers on the back of their car for issues that don't involve them and they don't understand and they can't really do much good on. And I always sort of do an analysis of myself. I don't want to be a do-gooder. I don't want to be that. What's the difference, right? Like, what's the authentic concern for the vulnerable and feigning concern for the vulnerable for social prestige or power, which we see a lot, right? People, we can see it with the BLM movement, all these big brands. You know, I'm working closely with the Uyghur community now, and I'm like, I cannot wait for the day that Nike is running commercials for the Uyghur. There's a special Uyghur shoe. That's the day I tell them you'll never hear from me again. You know, because we won. When it's profitable to stand with the community, when, you know, that means victory, right? So how do we avoid being a victimist, being a do-gooder?
You know, why do those causes that get so much attention and get the branding with major companies and corporations and politicians hold press conferences and so forth? When does that happen? I mean, even when you've got the major sports, the NFL, NBA, go down the line, when do they get involved? And the biggest sports celebrities and Hollywood celebrities and all of that, when it's promoted so much, they hear about it so much, people activate so much, and make it consequential if you do not stand on this side. And that's what we have to do. But the consequences, we can't threaten. We're going to cancel you. We're going to float lies about you. We're going to try to destroy you or your reputation or your living. That's what other people do. That's not us. But we have to speak out in all the ways we can. If you're not on social media platforms, I'm not sure how consequential they are anymore in influencing people. But if you are, then influence people there. But anyone, Jason, can write, whether it's a letter, seriously, a letter to the editor. Anyone can get on a news website and write there. Anyone can try to write an article and submit it, and somebody will be reading that somewhere, whether it gets published or not. You certainly, here's my big thing, and I've had congressmen on my show so many times over the years say, yes, it really matters if you call Congress. Yes, it really matters if you light up the switchboards and call your representatives in the House and in the Senate. And people say, well, how do I find who my representatives are, especially on the House side? There's so many. You just go to house.gov. And when you land there, there's a place to put in your zip code. And then they tell you right away who your reps are, what their offices are at the district level and federal level, what the phone numbers are, and email addresses. Contact those people elected to office and contact them in great numbers. That makes a big difference right there.
No, and you know what, Sheila, you have been a part of a lot of campaigns to influence Congress with me. And I think, I don't know if you remember the time I was walking with Chris Smith and I was on your show and we were hammering Durbin on something. I honestly don't even remember what it was. But we were hammering his office with something. I'd been on your show. And all of a sudden, I'm in the Capitol walking with Congressman Chris Smith. We turn the corner. We're walking behind Durbin. And he is kvetching about how his phones are ringing off the hook and these pro-lifers are, you know, just, they had to unplug the phones. And I called you. I said, Sheila, you won't believe it. You know, that is what's amazing about our country, that you can really influence your state representatives, your state senators. You can develop relationships in the party. You can eventually be able to influence your member of Congress personally through friendships or hard work. You know, but all of us should know our state representatives and our state senators. And then sometimes they go on, your state representative goes on to become a congressman, senator, governor. Who knows? Or candidate for president. I've had that happen to me with a friend. So, and then you have the real ability to influence. I think people don't understand really how powerful we are. If you remember, it was about 10 years ago, my friend was in the Nuba Mountains when Khartoum began a terror bombing campaign to keep the Nuba off the farms. He flew to D.C., and it was the day of the debt ceiling vote, the last day of that session. we, thanks to Congressman Chris Smith, were able to set up shop in the Rayburn Room, and we put up, this was Brad Phillips of the Persecution Project Foundation, founder. We were able to show all this evidence of Khartoum's war against the Nuba and how they were trying to create a famine by keeping them off their farms. And that led to a special hearing the very next day, after the very last day of Congress, that Hillary Clinton, they had to cancel Hillary's meeting. It was the last one. We took Hillary's spot thanks to a bipartisan group that fought for that. And that hearing led to Khartoum ceasing to bomb the Nuba, which ceased, which prevented a famine. And I remember when Brad and I were walking the halls of Congress, they were all obsessed with this debt ceiling vote, which was huge. And no one would meet with us. We were meeting with pages. Members of Congress who are my friends were like I was meeting with some 17-year-old page. We went to Chris Smith's office, and his staff was like, no. He's got this big vote. He's got to be on the floor. And Congressman Smith heard my voice. This was the second time we came back to his office, just Hail Mary pass. He heard our voice. He goes, Jason, come in. You got 5 minutes. He gave us an hour. He took us to the floor.
Yeah.
And we really prevented a famine, thanks to his courage, Frank Wolf's courage. So people need to know, it's sometimes we fail. Most likely we'll fail. My goals for this year, Sheila, for my organization, I should grab it, my 2021, it's to close the camps in East Turkestan, what China calls Xinjiang, get the Uyghurs free. That's one of my goals for the year.
That's a good one.
To front shelve food insecurity because of draconian government shutdowns. Another one of my goals, make a Biden communion the number one talked about issue in the church in America. It's big goals. Does it mean we're going to do it? Write a book, make another movie, but we can go for it. And then if only one in our lifetime succeeds, is it worth it? 100%, right?
100%. Yep. All those are great goals, Jason. Knowing you, I bet you can achieve every one of them. I know it takes hard work, but I think that's what you do every single day. I don't know how you do it all, but looking at someone like you then keeps me motivated. Yes, I can continue. It's not juggling a lot of balls; it's just carrying a lot in your arms. And if you consider like a knapsack on your back, okay, carry that load, because you just when we look at the martyrs and the saints, and when we look at those heroes of the world, when we look at Václav Havel, when we look at Dostoevsky, when I talked with at the Knapp Institute, a concentration camp survivor from Ukraine, and we had listening to his story, and other concentration camp survivors I've talked to from the days of communist takeover. It depends on which country we're talking about, but when you talk with them, and I did a whole long story on the underground church in Lithuania when the communists took over, the Soviets were running Lithuania, and how he continued to run the underground church. When you talk one-on-one with those people and you hear their story, and then I wrote a very long story about that, when you then tell others and get that out there and generate that the way you do in movies, the way you do in talks you give, the way you do in activism on Capitol Hill or in the Capitol itself, those things all make a difference. And they reach others who say, I didn't know this. I didn't know this was going on. Well, we tell them, and then be a voice for these people, or hold up that underground church hero from Lithuania or the concentration camp survivor from Ukraine and tell their story and say, yep, this is happening. This is what people are doing to people. While people here are, the summer of rage in 2020, that's not the Martin Luther King way. That's not what he would do. That's not peaceful demonstration for change for the good. So that's what we have to do, and that's what you're doing all the time. You're a real inspiration to me and a lot of other people.
Well, I'm only an inspiration because I'm surrounded by inspirational people, right? You meet these beautiful people, and you would have them on your show, like Shirin, the Yazidi girl, who now is in the States, and you'll appreciate this, Sheila. So I call Shirin. I go, Sharon, what do you want for Christmas? She's learning English. It's unbelievable, And she calls me brother. She goes, hey, brother, And I said, what do you want for Christmas? She goes, I don't know. And she wants an iPhone. She wanted an iPhone. So I was like, well, what are your hobbies? What are you getting into? Like, what do you do? She goes, COD. And I'm going to cry. I say, God, okay, I have a teenage sons. Do you mean Call of Duty? She's like, yes, Call of Duty. So she plays Call of Duty. And in her mind, she's getting I'm going to cry. She's getting revenge. She's fighting ISIS, the people who enslaved her and killed everyone in her village. And the reason it breaks my heart so much is I saw this before. There's this beautiful movie called Rain Over Me, or Rain on Me. I always forget. I met Adam Sandler at a party. I said, Rain Over Me is my favorite. It's one of the most beautiful movies. He goes, it's Rain on. He's like, which is it? He's like, I don't even know. It's Rain Over Me, or Adam Sandler didn't even know. It's Rain Over Me or Rain on Me, and it's an Adam Sandler movie. And it is. I've only seen it twice. It came out too close to 9/11, but it's about a dentist, who has, I believe, Don Cheadle's his best friend from college, and he sees him like riding a bicycle down the street, and he seems out of it. You find out this dentist had a nervous breakdown because his wife and daughters died in the Twin Towers. The plane flew into the Twin Towers. And you see him playing this video game the whole time, but it's kind of like you don't really see what it is. You just see him playing, and you see little real close-ups of it. Then at the end of the movie, it's revealed they're dragons trying to destroy buildings. And he is he's flying another dragon trying to fight the dragons to save the buildings. He's trying to save his family. And so when Sharon said this, it really reminded me of that movie and how every day she's trying to save her family, trying to save her family, trying to save her family. You know, to be around heroes like her, or someone like Dan Lipinski or Chris Smith, who tirelessly, with discipline, over decades, with a lot to lose, continuously risked everything. I've been privileged that I started this as a 17-year-old high school dropout. You know, I've never risked anything. I've never had anything to lose. And so I admire the heroes. To me, are the ones that have been the victims and you know, like Sharon, and continue to fight and to survive and to smile. And then to people who have the world to lose, politicians who, you know, that are like Congressman Lipinski didn't have to stand on those tough issues. He was a made man. He came from a powerful family. He had high name recognition. But because of his courage, he attracted the attention of the most powerful special interests, not in the district, but in the world, that made him their number one priority. Those are the real heroes, you know, the people with things to lose.
Yeah. Who would never cave for anything. I mean, back when Bart Stupak was a holdout, saying, I cannot, in the Democratic Party, I cannot sign on to the Affordable Care Act because it had, you know, the ability for it had abortion in it. And Dan Lipinski, the President Obama back then, you know, talked one-on-one with Bart Stupak, made him promises that he accepted. And he did. I mean, a lot of us were saying at the time, I can't believe Stupak caved. And I mean, that's really what it came down to. He did go along because he was made a promise. It was never materialized. But Congressman Lipinski did not. So Dan Lipinski stood as the last man standing, I do believe. I mean, he's told me before, Jason, that there are other pro-life Democrats, but we don't really, can you think of the names of who they are? I can think of a couple, but as you say, the powerful international Planned Parenthood, at least here in America, they're internationally extremely powerful, but they targeted certain seats. And one of them that they were after again and again until they finally succeeded was Dan Lipinski, because they wanted that pro-life Democrat out. There's no more room, they said, in the Democratic Party. It's not a big tent party. No room for pro-life Democrats. And then the other seat they wanted and worked on after election was the Honorable Congressman Henry Hyde, late Henry Hyde, God rest his soul, his seat, which was Peter Roskim's seat, for whom he also, like me, was a hero, Henry Hyde. And they targeted Roskim and targeted him, and finally they won his seat. And they do this time and again. In my state of Illinois, they targeted Peter Breen. You know, when you get, and others, but when you have people with a high profile who are honorable, and they are pro-life, and they are for the vulnerable, but there's nobody more vulnerable than that little innocent, very vulnerable child still in the womb. And you are going to stand up to anything to protect that child. So be it, if that means losing your seat in Congress, the job you have, you're seeking a degree at a university, you name it. Never mind even reputation.
Yeah, like Steve Moser, right? Steve Moser for exposing the one-child policy. Yeah. The greatest crime against women, it's the Holocaust. What the Holocaust was to Jews, yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day. What the Holocaust was to Jews, the one-child policy is to women. Every feminist group in the world should wear lapel pins on the one-child policy. It is that policy that targeted women. Not only that they were the victims of abortion as mothers, they were predominantly the victims of abortion in the womb. So Steve Moser, he lost his degree, but so what? The rest of history will say this is the guy that let the world know. This is the guy. Like the world, there were these two Jewish men that escaped the concentration camp and told the world what happened. Told the West what happened. It was two men that escaped, and it was their journey. I just read this story about them. The journey was amazing, and because they got the word out, it led to the Jewish community being able, and the response of different governments to save a lot of lives. And that was what Steve Moser did. Steve Moser, but you're right, and I think that's probably who you were thinking of when you said you don't get your degree, you lose your seat. Why would you be in Congress if you couldn't express your beliefs in the non-negotiables, right? Non-negotiables.
Amen. And stand up to party leadership if they're telling you to vote what you know in your conscience to be the wrong way. And so Dan Lipinski did that. And so when we have others who do that just because you are standing on truth and you are standing on principle and the rights of vulnerable human beings, then so be it. If that means losing the seat you have, the job you have, as you said, the degree you have, well, it must not have mattered that much. I can't believe they're trying to strip people, retroactively, pushing on Harvard now.
Or Yale.
Degree, or Yale.
Yeah, there's a group from Yale. I think they're about to go there and burn their diplomas. So
unbelievable.
I heard about this, yeah.
And then when you bring up China, Reggie Littlejohn with Women's Rights Without Frontiers, as you say, the women, the women of Planned Parenthood and others, should be wearing those lapel pins, because women are being ravaged, damaged, in their lives, and they're going to suffer for years or decades to come after their abortions or forced abortions in China, which is what Reggie Littlejohn and Steve Moser have put such a spotlight on, that this is happening. And it's happening, it's ravaging women.
And it's still happening, by the way, and the Chinese embassy just bragged about it. It's the two-child policy now. Still coerced abortions, and some women don't get to have any abortions. Any babies. If their ethnicity or their community they believe is overpopulated, or they have a sort of a system. I know this because I had a group of very affluent women from China come to Hawaii. They wanted to talk to me about funding a film, and they wanted to fund a film with big stars. So I met with these women. They wanted to meet on a Sunday. And I was traveling a lot. Did I ever tell you this story?
No.
And I didn't want to meet. I was really kind of upset that they wanted to meet on a Sunday, because I'm pretty disciplined about my Sundays for my family. But, my friend had a big film that I wanted to get funded. So I met with them, and I'm pitching them this film, and it had big stars. This film has since been made. It was called Man Down, starring Sheila LaBeouf. It's a great film on PTSD.
Oh, yeah.
So I was trying to get funding for that movie at the time. So, and it was my favorite director, Ditto Montiel. So Steve McAvity, my favorite producer, and Ditto Montiel, my favorite director. And so I'm like, I'm going to go meet them on a Sunday. And they were playing with their bejeweled phones. They were so decked out. The shoes, their clothing and their shoes, their purse was worth more than my net worth, each of them. But they were not paying any attention to me. And I kind of got mad. And I have a film, Broken Heart Sing, which I'm still trying to get made. It is my heart that's breaking and singing for this movie. But I said, you know what, ladies, I'm boring you, I think. Can I tell you the movie I really want to get funded? And I pitched them Broken Heart Sing, which is about how pop culture communicates the sorrow of abortion through music and movies and TV, that the artists tell the truth. They can't help but tell the truth. And we look at music, movies, and TV to really come to understand what abortion really is and how it impacts women. And as I was telling them this, they were staring at me. They didn't let a word fall to the ground. And they go, "Why is this the movie you want to make?" I said, "I have two goals in life: to end coerced abortions in China and to end abortion in America." And I told them my story. And then the women began to cry. These women were stoic. Mm. And the woman that was like the meanest, she just seemed tough. I don't know if mean's the word, just a tough character, was the most broken. And she shared with me that she never had kids. And because of her administrative district was out of permits for children. So her first pregnancy was terminated and it destroyed her fertility. And I asked her, I said, "You're a very wealthy, powerful woman. Why couldn't you bribe somebody?" And she said, "The snow on the mountain is seen from everywhere." Saint Escriva has a saying similar to this. She's like, "If only we weren't so wealthy or powerful, I wouldn't have had to have that abortion probably." And so we had to be made an example of. There was no way out. And so this is still happening. And this is really, I have a spiritual exercise I do, Sheila, every night. When I lie down, I pray for myself. It's a little cheesy. I sit there and I think, God exists. God created me. God wills me into existence. God is holding me into existence. And then I pray. I do my act of contrition. I pray. Then I go out one person. I bring the camera back a little bit, right? I zoom out. One person. Then there's my wife. And I pray for her, think of her needs, and I zoom out and to my children. And then I zoom out to my neighbors. I zoom out to my friends that live near me. Then I zoom out all over the world, family, friends. Then I collide into East Turkestan and the concentration camps. I collide into Yemen and the famine and the sorrow and the war and the children dying in drone strikes and to the food riots in Nigeria. And I do that until I fall asleep. I pray, zoom out. And I think we should all do that, right? And then we start close to ourselves. If our spouse is suffering from depression or mental illness or cancer, then that's what we focus on. Our children, what are their needs? Are they going through an awkward period? Are they insecure? Did they get in a fight with their best friend? Did our neighbor just lose their job? Did they just go through a divorce? When we do this, we start close to ourselves, and then you begin to realize how frail and vulnerable everyone around us is. And then we live in a valley of tears. And we just, not that we all, in ourselves sometimes, Sheila, as I'm sure you know, we're so addled by our own pain and sorrow that that's where we stop. It's myself. Okay, Lord, I'm broken. I'm depressed. I'm lost. I'm confused. Then I stop on myself. Yeah. Or maybe it's my spouse, your spouse, or maybe it's your children. But I think we should all do that. We should all, if we all need to understand, we live in a world of sad, lonely, broke. We don't hate you. We all struggle with different things. Whether it's, I have 2 friends. I have 4 friends fighting cancer. 2 friends that are really struggling with prescription painkiller addiction. Really close to me. I've got divorce around close to me. So we're really addled by vulnerable people. And then is people who live in a constitutional republic that are the most influential citizens. Each one of us is influential. Each one of us, right, Sheila? That then we have a responsibility where there are these great generational tragedies, to the best of our ability to lean out on those two, like the genocide of the Uyghur, like the abandonment of the child in the womb to violence of abortion. Because we can have influence there too. Yeah.
Jason, abortion's genocide. It's simply that. Words mean things, and that's exactly what it is. You can't call it anything else. It's interesting that for this week, in this week of the awareness, genocide awareness, the UK faced the House of Commons acted on the Allparty genocide amendment. They were saying mounting evidence. You talk about forced abortion in China. They said mounting evidence of targeted birth prevention strategy. Well, that's forced abortion, along with destruction of cemeteries, reports of mass incarceration, indoctrination, detention, surveillance, enslavement, forced labor can't be ignored. And when you read that list, you're when the person, as you just described, oneself, one's neighbor, one's family members, you think, I can't handle more. I'm dealing with so much myself. But when we come out of ourselves, no matter what we're dealing with, that's when our own burden becomes lightened, when we face the burdens of others and try to lift that from them. And so when you said, Jason, my flags went up, my eyes lit up, whatever. When you said these ways of movies, songs, this is art, being able to tell the human story. And when it tells the true human story anywhere, it really reaches people in a way that speeches can't. And heaven knows, international bodies of government can't, because these different clergy of different religions came together and signed documents in these past days on this all-party genocide amendment, saying that critically, this is literally their words, the amendment would provide a sound legal basis for government action that is at present unobtainable through the United Nations due to the misuse of Security Council veto powers. So to wrap these thoughts together in that story, listen to this, Jason. Elie Wiesel, famous Holocaust survivor who speaks out and tells story wherever and whenever he can. He said, this is a direct quote, whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness.
Ooh.
So
that is so powerful. Whoever
isn't it?
listens to it's like in our movie Stoning of Soraya M. where Sheree Ashley says to Jim Caviezel, take my voice with you.
Yeah. So as contemporary witnesses, Elie Wiesel said, we have a duty to speak with one voice and a duty to act. Well, speaking is acting, but then take it wherever we can. Like this amendment, they called on members of the British government to pass and put a new chapter in our approach to ending genocide. But just being a witness, when you listen to a witness, you can't help but become then a witness. Tell that story, whether through art, song, poetry, articles, film, whatever you're able to do, be a witness and be a voice for the voiceless. And we can do this.
Yeah, the most effective video I've ever seen for the Uyghur was done by a young girl who does makeup tutorials.
Huh.
And it went viral all over, I believe it was TikTok. And, millions of people saw it. And she was telling how to make your, I guess, eyelashes look fuller. But in between showing young women how to do that, she told the story of the Uyghur. And, and that's where I think I want to sort of wrap it up with this. As an organization, Hero in our two programs are Movie to Movement and the Vulnerable People Project. We look to see where we can actually have success and where we as Americans are culpable. So again, I don't want to be a do-gooder. I care about the Dalit, but I'm not going to fly to India. I don't really see how that I can have any influence in that, and I don't see a place for our organization there. But when I look at the Uyghurs in camps and they're forced labor and they work for U.S. brands, products that I have in my house, I am sure in my home there are products made in China by forced labor. And so I have touched things that Uyghurs have touched, whether it's the case to my Apple phone, the cord, something I have touched was touched by a victim of the genocide of the Uyghur, which is really heartbreaking. So that's what we as an organization look to do. And I am laser focused. So like with the Kurds, the first article I ever published was, I believe, 1995, today, on Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it was on how Turkish planes built in Seattle, fighter planes that were built in Seattle, the bombs that were built in Washington State, were being flown over Kurdistan, and the bombs were falling onto civilians. And it was during the week of Holocaust Remembrance. And I and I wrote something like, never again we say we toast in opulent ballrooms as we sip our wine and eat our cheese. This was before I ever even had wine. I was a college kid. Now I like wine, so I've edited that out. But, saying never again, meanwhile, bombs fall from American-built planes onto children hiding in damp crevices in Kurdistan. So that's something we're involved in, right? We were responsible. But you have a very broad view. So, when I was talking to you yesterday on the phone, you just were railing off all of the sorrows in the world. Can you just give us sort of can you share with what's happening right now? Well, as we're saying never again on Remembrance Day, as we're saying never again, what's going on today?
Well, for one thing, that the genocide in our own country and other countries of the world broke my heart when Ireland, which had a constitution banning abortion and making it illegal, turned the other way. When you see country after country, the victories of movements that you know to be wrong, then that's what's happening ongoing, the genocide. I had a very long conversation yesterday with a constitutional law expert who probably has the single case or set of cases right now. I can't say much more at the moment, but he's coming on my show soon. He said, okay, it's time to talk about this publicly because it's making its way to the Supreme Court. So that's the case I think Justice Roberts is looking for when he sees a case that's the human life correct. I mean, it's that, but also women, the damage to women and the rights of women. Then this has that, and it has everything nailed down constitutionally. It's going to be a great case, but that's right there a genocide. But I'm also looking, Jason, I'm remembering Archbishop Gabbard of Aleppo standing on the sidewalk in front of the United Nations before we went in for that day's session we were both involved in, and interviewing him on my recording thing, and him telling me how he escaped the bombing just to get on the plane to be at the United Nations. They didn't think he'd make it, but he did. He had to be there. And so he told me what his people asked him to say here in America about what they're suffering there and what they need from us, the attention they need from us. Father Douglas Bazzi, who himself had been a victim of ISIS, they used a hammer and kicking also some of his teeth out. And he was a prisoner of theirs for a while. And then he was freed. And he's able to talk about how his people have set up tents right next to the Catholic Church because they don't feel safe anywhere else. And these are stories, we're the witnesses, the voices that speak. And so those are things I'm doing and staying in touch with, it's like Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, who, by the way, said on my show that when right after the genocide resolution in Congress, which he authored, and then they voted on it, and it unanimously passed, unanimously. On my show, he said, Sheila, we can't get a unanimous agreement in Congress on Mother's Day. But of course, you laugh. And he said, but we got the unanimous vote on the genocide resolution. And he's very, very concentrated on the Yazidi, which is why there are so many in Nebraska, his district, his state. But then he went on to tell me in the conversation, Jason, that this is a member of Congress people don't hear a lot about because he's quietly doing a lot of work. And this is what I love is let's do the work. Let's don't get a lot of flash in the pan. And yet at the same time, when there is anything to tell publicly, tell publicly. So publicly on my show, and he wanted to say this on the airwaves, that when he has town halls or he goes back to the district and people surround him and they talk to him about problems in the area, problems in the state, problems in the district, problems, whatever, at the federal level. And he listens intently. He said, I tell them at the end of listening to them, the conversation, okay, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and I'll do what I can about that. I've made notes about that. I've made mental notes about that. My aide here is taking notes. He said, I hear you. But now I have a question for you. He said, I will do what I can. But my question for you is, what are you doing about it? I never forgot that. Because I ask myself that every day. What am I doing right now, today? If it's something rather innocuous that I might be doing, then I get off of that, that exercise, I don't mean physical exercise, whether it's like scanning the headlines yet again and being a little bit sidetracked by this news story over here. I don't get sidetracked by gossip stories, but I really want to kind of cover it all. To your point about the Dalit in India, Jason, I read a lot of stories about things I can't make a difference in, but I really then focus my attention on things I can make a difference in. And that's What genocide resolution is happening where, and where can we call people's attention to it? What's happening in our country that people don't know about, because you turn on any news channel, any news network, and you're going to hear which political party is up, which political party is down, what this particular vote or move is going to do to win for this party or this person, and who's going to lose. And when you hear that count of who's winning, who's losing, who's up, who's down, what's the next vote they're taking, it's all politics all the time. So I'm looking for, where are the human interest stories? Where are the human rights stories? What are the great human rights issues of our time? And then I want to get guests on my show to talk about it. And then I want to write articles that can get published that spread the awareness of it. That's kind of my, I don't know, universal view of what can I do? You can't do more than you can do. But we can do much by being that witness Elie Wiesel talked about.
Yeah,
you hear about it, you be a witness.
Yeah, I love that. I think we assume a lot of this is already being done, and it's always striking that it's not. Like and we can start close to home. I mean, I remember once my daughter was very active for many years when we lived in Los Angeles. She would wake up before the sun, ride her bicycle to the bus, put the bike on the bus, and then go down to Skid Row in Los Angeles, where she would serve the homeless till noon, and then she would go to school, college. And so she brought me down there. It was when she would bring me down there, the homeless would look at me like, is that guy safe? They were protecting my daughter from me. You know, they'd look at me like, because she'd say, Dad, I'm so safe here. Everyone takes care of me, and you don't have to worry. But one day when I was down there, I met a young woman who was not young, a little younger than me, but she was from Darfur. She was from Sudan, and she was a war refugee, but she had just totally been crushed by what she experienced. And so she would wander around the city homeless, just lost, staring into the distance. And so who would imagine that you could serve victims of genocide on the streets of Los Angeles, right? You could, it's all around us. You know, I know, there's a lot of Yazidi in Nebraska. So one of my Yazidi friends needs surgery. I was shocked. You know, she works at McDonald's. She's in a home recovering from her PTSD and the trauma. And I just assumed, I don't know why I assumed, that her rehabilitation and medical bills would be covered from somebody. And no, she's paying for it. This young woman who is really, her people were the victims of our foreign policy catastrophe. 123 members of her family were murdered. She was imprisoned, brutalized in ways I don't want to say. Had her face smashed in, her stomach cut open, and she is paying for that. She has insurance through McDonald's, but she's paying. She's got a lot of costs. So now I'm trying to raise the money to get some of that covered. But I assumed, I didn't even have to ask. I just assumed the home she was at, there must be a program. It would have never crossed my mind in a million years that this young woman was going to have to be responsible for these medical bills on her own. So when we get engaged in our local community, all of us, especially if we live in urban areas, we're dealing with people from the most vulnerable people in the world are in our neighborhoods, whether it's the teenage girl who's a victim of abuse, who's pregnant, who's walking through the door of that pregnancy center, or in all of our major cities, there are people who've been displaced by the great tragedies of the past 3, 4, 5 decades.
Right. They're everywhere. See, they're in front of us. They're not just way over there, though they are way over there. But as you say, they're here in our country as well. And when this girl is paying for her own medical bills that are so high, and she's working at McDonald's, this is something, Jason, that if people of means even hear about this, that somebody will probably step up and want to do something about that. But it's hearing it. It's how are they going to hear it if no one tells them? And if not us, then who? And that's scriptural, of course, sort of, not the exact words, but it's that. If not us, then who? And if not now, Jason, then when? Remember the film Hotel Rwanda? I'll never forget that line. First of all, the whole film. And the Tutsi and the Hutu, when they were in that horrible machetes, it was fighting with people. It was just horrific. And then Nick Nolte played the United Nations, I think, officer who had the blue helmet on and so forth. And he told Paul Rusesabagina, I think was his name, who ran Hotel Rwanda. I'll never forget the line when they're pleading for him when he goes back to America to send help, to do something. And that line, when he turns to him, the United Nations Nick Nolte officer, and he said, Paul, he said, I'm afraid that what's happening is people are sitting at their dinner table, looking at the TV, and they see the film and they see what's going on and they shake their heads and they say that's terrible, and then they go back to eating. I can't abide that, Jason. I can't. And that lit a fire under me that was already there. It just ignited it all the more. We can't be the people who say that's terrible, somebody ought to do something. If not us, then who?
Yeah, no. Have you seen The Hidden Life? A Hidden Life by Terrence Malick on
no, but I've heard of it.
Franz Jägerstätter. Yeah, it was just about an Austrian farmer who refused to lie. He refused to take the Hitler loyalty oath to Hitler. And
right, I heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
And because he was, German and he had friends, they kept just making it easier for him until eventually it was like, listen, you don't even have to go in the military. You can stay on your farm with your kids, your wife. Just say the loyalty oath. Even his own bishop told him to say it. It's a true story. He refused. And in refusing, he was killed. After a long appeals process, because he was German, he had a whole appeals process. And he refused. They gave him a lot of chances just to say the loyalty oath. And that's one simple thing we can all do, which is refuse to lie about vulnerable people. Just
Amen.
Don't do it. I might tell some other lies. I might lie about my bench press to you, Sheila, but I'm not gonna lie on vulnerable people. Never. By the great God's grace, I pray. That's where I will not lie. And if I'm wrong on anything, I hope I'm wrong when the spirit of the age is right. And I hope, if the only time I can be right is when the spirit of the age is wrong. Because that's where you can do a lot of damage. If you are wrong where the spirit of the age is wrong, you can do a lot of harm. So if in 1950 you're a virulent bigot, you can do a lot of harm, right? Mm-hmm. I don't see how much harm a bigot would do today. A racist. They would be limited in the amount of harm they could do. Biden could secretly be the world's biggest racist, but because of our culture and today's reality, he would be limited in the harm that he could do. So that's always been my prayer. Is like, I want to be, if I can only be right where the spirit of the age is wrong, that's where I want to be right. Because I don't want to cause sorrow. I don't want to cause suffering. I don't want to cause pain. And I'm sure I'm wrong on some things. And I just hope I'm wrong where the spirit of the age is right.
Amen. Because the spirit of the age, especially the people who are in power now, call abortion health care. It is not health care. And that's the spirit of the age. The woman's right to choose is such an old mantra. And yet it's still their mantra. And it is still promulgated. So we have to, that is the spirit of the age. And through my state of Illinois, like New York, it has that Reproductive Care Act or whatever it's called. No reproduction going on, no care, it's not health. And so we have to speak out about this. And talk about the undercover videos that showed the trafficking of baby body parts. In other words, we have to be that witness Ali Vidal called us to, and others have called us to, and tell the story and make sure others are aware, because the spirit of the age is getting all kinds of people glomming on, because that is the way. It's like Chesterton said, fish, even dead fish flow with the stream. It takes a lot for a fish to swim upstream against the tide, against the flow of the others. And dead fish flow with the water, but you got to muster your strength to swim upstream against that flow, against the tide, because we know that that's where the truth is, not the direction that the masses are going in, the crowds, because they're all flocking on to the cause of the day. And the cause of the day can be very, very wrong. but they're buying into that simply because there are big, glamorous, elite, powerful
They're dead
people.
Fish.
There you are.
They're dead fish.
And
Just
going with the flow.
They might as well be dead, right? They might as well be dead because they're just going with the flow. And that was where Renee Girard helped me understand that, because I used to feel like, why am I always getting in trouble like with my work? It's just much, and people would say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Jason, why do you have to, la, 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 la. And then I thought, okay, something wrong with me. But then Girard said, to be in solidarity with the vulnerable truly is to become as vulnerable as they are. Mm-hmm. So if you're standing with the truly vulnerable, you might get kicked off Twitter. You just might. The bird watchers. Have you heard about this bird watching?
I just did. Yeah, I just did. I think, a day or 2 or 3 ago. I mean, within this week, I know that.
It's the creepiest. It's just, it's
weird.
Overtly Orwellian. They didn't even try to give it a name that wasn't creepy. It was like, let's come up with the creepiest name ever. Oh, spy on your family and friends and report them to Twitter. We call it bird watching. What would we do if McDonald's did this? Would we go to McDonald's if you hear your family and friends speaking in booths at McDonald's, let us know and we won't serve them? It's so bizarre.
Yeah, can you believe we're there? Can you believe we're here at this point in our country? I mean, they love to say elections have consequences. Well, here we are.
Yeah.
And, buckle up, because it's, the work is out there. We can do this. We've done it before. We'll continue doing it in the pro-life movement. But the pro-life movement, Jason, you and I know this. People have to understand this. It's for all people who can and be hurt and are being hurt right now, who can be saved and spared that death or harm to them, like the women who do get abortions, the people who are in this country, but they're unseen. They're the great unseen masses of people in this country, like the Yazidi girl and others of that community, although fortunately they do have great spokesmen and people like you and Congressman Fortenberry and others. But we have to speak out because the masses are flowing in that direction. It's so Orwellian where we are right now. The Birdwatch is just one of them. I mean, there's just so much. They're going after a list of people who have given donations to, really excellent charitable causes now. I mean, when they're trying to take away your college degree from who knows how many years ago, this is wild. The pronouns, the things you can't say, the taking the oath now. Speaking of that, the film A Hidden Life, the oath people have to take now, especially in politics, is yes, I will end the Hyde Amendment, which, by the way, has saved millions of lives, and now will take thousands pretty quickly this year and onward if it continues to be removed, the Hyde Amendment, from the law. And so we are, but it's more Orwellian than that when you get into this. People just read something you have posted the wrong way. You use a word that offends somebody. Oh, well, offending somebody is a great sin. Well, I wish people really understood what sin is and what the consequences of that really are. And that's our job, to witness to that. Paul was just the greatest evangelist ever, and he was unafraid. I love that. Augustine as well, once he saw the light. So when we learn that, then we learn courage, and we learn eternal consequences are really what matters, because life is short, but eternity is forever.
Yeah, and like you said, that it's we've come to this strange place. Who could believe it? But what's exciting to me about it, and because we're Catholic and we've been involved in a broad range of human rights issues in our adult life, we're not startled by this. This happens all the time all over the world, where I think a lot of people are just shell-shocked and like, what is good? This is nothing like this has ever happened before. We're like, well, it's not even bad. What are you talking about? When you know the story of people like Father Jersey, or if you know what the Uyghur are going through, or what happened in Sudan or in Serbia. So when you know these things, you go, now what is shocking about it is that it is here, the last bastion of freedom, and that it's so global and it's so pervasive. These are the shocking things, but it's a shock in degree, right? Not in kind. It's not a different thing. It's the same thing. But what's interesting to me, Sheila, is our human rights work is grounded in our understanding of the human person as revealed to the world through Christianity and really specifically the Catholic Church. The teaching of the incarnation, the Jewish scriptures on the Imago Dei, this formed our vision of the human person. And then our politics flows out of that, treating people with respect and thoughtfulness is every human being is the most important creature on earth. But what's interesting to me, and I was just reading Jacques Maritain yesterday where he said there's a pre-philosophic understanding of the numinous or a pre-philosophic understanding of God that's almost instinctual. And there's these, what I call instinctual Catholics, where their behavior and their courage to me reveals a Christian understanding of the human person, although they're not Christian. And I would say people like Joe Rogan or Dave Rubin or Tulsi Gabbard. Dave Rubin is not, we all know who Dave is, but his courage and his sort of thoughtfulness to standing with the vulnerable, standing with the and bravely telling the truth to power with a lot to lose. Same thing with Joe Rogan. Same thing with Tulsi. Isn't it strange? This is where my hope comes from. There's this broad coalition of people, not even maybe some of the most outspoken ones aren't even Christian. The bravest ones aren't Christian. But when you try to deduce their vision of the human person, what must it be? It's the same as ours. It's just sort of an instinctual level. They have that instinctual understanding of human dignity.
And, I'm glad you brought it. Exactly. Human dignity is in every single person, even people who ideologically completely oppose you and, you with a person listening right now, when they ideologically so vehemently oppose you or you oppose what they stand for, each one of us and them and, the other, the capital O as it's become, has the same human dignity because we are made all equally in the image of God. It's interesting, Jacques Maritain, when you brought him up, this always fascinated me, which is why I put it in the book, Jason, because people don't know this. People don't know that he was one of many who were prominent, French Catholic philosopher that he was, Maritain, who wrote the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
That's right. Thank you for bringing that up. That's right.
And that they said in the preamble of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it still stands today. It's in the wording. They didn't rewrite it. It opens with, I put it in my book because people don't know, and I want people to know that the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights says right up front in the preamble, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world, whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind. In a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. As this goes on, and so I just a clip here. Whereas the peoples of the United Nations have in the Charter reaffirmed their faith in fundamental human rights in the dignity and worth of the human person and equal rights of men and women, have determined to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Now, jumping to the end, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement, Jason, for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education, get that, to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, meaning increasingly, national and international, to secure, this is where it ends, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance, both among the peoples of member states themselves and among the peoples of territories under their jurisdiction. In other words, all people have equal human rights, equal dignity, and everyone in this body and in all other countries of the world shall recognize that and shall be upheld. And what has happened to us since then? But that's still the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for the UN.
Sheila, I think that's a really good place to even kind of wrap this up. That is so powerful. And you're right. What has happened since then? We don't really hear never again anymore, do we? We've given up on that. We've given up in even saying it. because we've just accepted eruptions of democide and genocide will happen. We'll profit from them or ignore it, and it's quite a sorrowful thing. It's quite sorrowful. But
what's joyful or hopeful? There it is. Hopeful is that there are so many of us who want to keep this cause alive and keep that flame and that torch lit and carry it forward. I've used this analogy before. Paul Revere, when he started his ride, it was calling those who could hear him shouting out. And I've sat at the Minuteman Museum up in Massachusetts, out in the countryside by Concord and Lexington. And as he went on that ride through the towns, this board lights up over the screen. This auditory little tiny room goes dark. And all you see is the board that has the ride of Paul Revere. And red lights start to light up as he makes his ride along that road. And those red lights are the lights that go on in houses where they have been warned, his fellow, those who will fight off the encroaching enemy to keep their liberties and keep their families safe and their communities safe. And the lights, Jason, aren't just on the road. As he rides, gives me goosebumps when I think about it. But as he rides, more and more and more red lights start to come on, scattered throughout the countryside. Why? Because they're calling out to the next farm over, to the next house over, and they're calling to the next one over. And you see that on that ride, that more and more and more of those lights come on, and they form and they take up whatever arms they have to. They get on their horses, they ride with Paul Revere, and we are in a Paul Revere moment. I don't mean for arms, I mean for calling out with our voices. And the real true way to battle back, if you will, I don't like the battle analogy, but is to defend the vulnerable. And so you have a great vulnerable the human beings project, and that's a very important thing for everybody to get behind.
Well, Sheila, I can't thank you. You've always been shoulder to shoulder with me. I'm looking forward to having you regularly on the show, and I hope I get to be on your show sometime soon too.
You will, Jason, very soon. So people should stay tuned for that. We'll put up the link.
All right, Sheila. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I am so excited that you have left that ancient format of radio and you have joined the future. Radio is basically like cave drawings at this point. You've left the world of, you're not drawing on caves anymore. You're in the future. They'll be listening to podcasts on Mars not too long from now.
Yeah, people are telling me they'll download podcasts when they just won't tune on into radio. I didn't realize that it had become such a big thing. I just know it gives us the voice, Jason. It gives us the chance to broadcast with voices that we bring on, our own voices telling people what we learned, sharing it. It's like the Paul Revere ride, right? Telling others and having voices of experts or guests or friends who come on our shows and tell others what people need to know.
Well, let me tell you the exciting thing about podcasts, Sheila, is I was in local talk radio for a very long time, and I loved local talk radio. It was awesome, and I would do it again even. I might do it. I might go to a radio station here and say, I'd like an hour a week or something. But local talk radio is great because it's your tribe, it's your community. And so all your friends and family and neighbors and everyone listens to it, and you go into the local diner, and they say, hey, if you mention my diner, I used to do this all the time. They go, mention my diner, I give you a free breakfast, Jason. And so I'd say, I had breakfast at Al's today, and it's beautiful. And on Relevant, you have our tribe, our community that was national, and it had a big reach. But what's interesting about podcast is you find your tribe, not the network's tribe, not the network's brand. You find your tribe. You find your audience. And that was my goal with this show. I want to find my tribe, my Sheilas, my Dan Lipinskis, my friends, people like that in every nook and cranny of the world. It might be 8 people. It might be 10 million people. I just want to find all of them. And now we have an audience of about 80,000. And that's our tribe. Wow. And, all over the world. In fact, Iceland, welcome to the show. In the past, we have someone discovered the show in Iceland a couple weeks ago, and now it is spreading all over Iceland. You just see it light up, bum, 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 and you're like, wow, now I have a new country added to. Yeah, and that's what's great. And that's what you're going to find, Sheila, is, and you can look on the map and you'll see where people are listening and what countries and how many downloads. And to know that I have people listening in China, not just government officials, welcome, but we have people listening across the Middle East, across Africa and Latin America, all across the United States. But we're all very similar, different religions, different nationalities and ethnicities. But it's the sort of the strange, beautiful tribe that is addled by the thoughts of our privilege, addled maybe by injustices that we experienced, and addled that other people are experiencing the same, and we don't want them to do it alone. That's who this tribe is. Right. And Sheila, you are you're one of our tribe, and I can't wait till you find your tribe, and watch as your show grows to I'm sure it'll be one of the biggest podcasts in the world, and it's going to be exciting to see.
You've always been a great friend, Jason, and we support each other. We lift each other up. We talk together about things that matter, and they are of a piece. We are of a mind because we have the same passion for people and people in need and people who just want friendship, who are alone, who are isolated, who are endangered. We want to be that friend. We want to tell others. We want to build community. And we can do this no matter who's in power anywhere in the world, in your government abroad or in our government in America, no matter who. It's we the people who make the difference. So be not afraid and have courage always. And Jason is a great inspiration. Jason, you're a great inspiration for me and for many others.
Well, Sheila, I can't thank you enough, and we'll talk together soon.
Very soon and very soon, and on my show and yours as well.
Okay, aloha. And that was my dear friend Sheila Liaugminas. You know what's more important than commemorating a past genocide? It is working to prevent a genocide today that has to be remembered. Huh? So that's what we're doing here on the Jason Jones Show. That's the mission of the Vulnerable People Project. We are working with the vulnerable, striving and struggling to prevent genocides. And sometimes we fail. I saw clear as a bell in October of 2001 that a war in Iraq would lead to devastation to the vulnerable minorities in Iraq, in the Nineveh Plains. I could see it like the hand in front of my face. And then to watch it all unfold helplessly as I struggled to share and have my voice heard was hard, Today, we have concentration camps in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan. And there are a lot of death in those camps, horrible things in those camps. Let's get those camps closed, those people sent home. Let's have this, let's stop this genocide from being complete. And that's our mission. That's why I do the show. And that's why the show is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. Go to our website, thegreatcampaign.org. Become a monthly donor. When you are a monthly donor with thegreatcampaign.org, you know that every month that you are standing in solidarity with the vulnerable, helping us do our work in making this podcast, writing articles, white papers, influence campaigns, educational campaigns. And when you become a monthly donor, you are shoulder to shoulder with us as we serve the vulnerable. That's thegreatcampaign.org. And this episode is also being brought to you by MyPillow. You know it's the best pillow in the world. It doesn't go flat. You can wash and dry them as many times as you want. It is made in the USA, and for $29.98, it's more than half off with the code Jones. You can get a queen pillow for $5 more. You can get the king. If you don't have the mattress topper, you haven't been listening, because the mattress topper is an awesome, awesome product, and you will sleep better than you have ever slept in your life. Go to mypillow.com. Use the code Jones. Click on the radio listener square and use the code Jones. All right, guys? Until next time, the Jason Jones Show.
This has been the Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.